Okay, welcome everybody to today's webinar, Talk with Todd, Cognos Performance Tuning Q&A. Today's agenda, we'll do some quick introductions, get into your questions. We did receive questions both about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, some just a couple of days ago, and then we will probably obviously receive some today during the Q&A panel. So I'll try to get them in the order they came in. And if, like I said, if I don't get to all of them today, I will try to post a written response on our website. So don't worry if I don't get to you, we will get a response out there. So just be patient. We have a lot of questions coming in. Once we get to the questions, I did want to do, if there's time, the IPPA demo, which is a new tool similar to like the Zippy analytics that you may have used in the past. It allows you to get some really specific timelines and performance around specific slow running reports. So I wanted to show that. And then we'll close out with some additional resources, touch on Senturus, and then get to some more Q&A at the very end. Quick introduction on myself. I'm Todd Schumann. I run the Cognos optimization, installations, optimization practice lead here at Senturus. I've been working with Cognos since about 2000, going back to the old days of Cognos Impromptu, and staying as current as I can on the new releases. Currently Cognos 12, which I'll be running some demos from today. So if you haven't seen Cognos 12, you'll get a chance to see that as well. Let's get into some questions. These are the ones that kind of came in, 7 to 10 days ago, and I'll kind of get to as many as I can here. First one I got is, what can we do to help prevent reports that get stuck in a pending status? And I usually recommend, let's to try to get some more information is sort of a generic status. There's lots of things that can cause this. The first thing I would do is, what is the Cognos run history telling you? Is it giving you any clue as to where the issue is? I usually see 3 kind of main causes for this. The first one being that mail server issue, which a lot of organizations run into. Cognos has generated a PDF or an Excel or some kind of report output on a schedule, and it's trying to pass it off to the mail server, and there's something incorrectly configured on that mail server, so it's just stuck in a waiting and it hasn't passed it off, which is going to be related to just kind of getting your mail server connection, the SMTP settings correct. Another issue is jobs can get stuck in the notification tables. And depending on how you have that set up, you may have split off a separate notification database. If not, it's going to be a set of tables in your content store database. And those kind of contain all the jobs that Cognos has to process. So if you crashed or things were kind of stuck in limbo in there, you're going to need to kind of clear them out. And there's some scripts that I can show you that will do that. And then the third sort of major one is just expired credentials. You'll occasionally, due to various changes in your environment, need to just renew your credentials, and it's very easy to do. I'll show that as well. So again, the first one is this SMTP. Just a couple quick notes on that. I think I've got Cognos here. So in your notification settings, you're pretty limited on what you can configure here. You've got the mail server. You may have a user ID and password, this default sender, and then do you want to turn SSL encryption on? So not a whole lot of settings here. There are some settings to turn on TLS. If you're using Office 365, it's required. There's also some settings in the dispatchers under the delivery services where you can set the default sender to be, this, and it has to come from a specific account, even if you have the account and password correct. So again, if you're having issues with your mail server, reach out in the chat. We can try to take a look at that offline, but typically, like I said, it's very limited what we can do on the Cognos server. It's mostly on the mail server, but there are a couple key things that can prevent you from having the schedules not go and just kind of get stuck in those waiting queues. The other one on the list was the notification store tables. So there's scripts in your Cognos installation directory. This is where I've got it. I got it on eProgram files, IBM Cognos Analytics 12. And in the configuration directory, there is, I think it's in schemas. Yeah, schemas. You've got a bunch of scripts that live here that can do various things to kind of help administrators. This one specifically is under delivery, and they break them out into the different databases that it supports. So if you're on Oracle, obviously it's Oracle, DB2, but I'm in SQL Server, so I'm usually running these. The main one here is this NC drop. So if you've got a bunch of jobs stuck in your queue that aren't going away, you can just grab these really basic scripts here and just run it directly against your notification database. Again, that you may have that separate. I do recommend notification database. If you've been to any of my webinars, it's definitely a thing that can help speed up your environment, because again, these tables are all going to be part of the standard content store if you don't specify the separation of them. And if you are a very delivery schedule heavy organization, you're going to be constantly churning and running lots of connections through your content store database. So by separating that, it allows the content store database to focus on just the primary content manager tasks and not to deal with all these notification databases. So again, run this on the correct database. It's going to basically drop those tables. And when you restart Cognos, it's going to recreate them fresh, and you won't have any of those lingering tasks that are in your list there. And then finally, the credentials, I believe the buttons change around in all these versions, but I believe it's under profile and settings. Credentials, there's just this renew button here. So it's possible your credentials just need to be renewed. You can just click this button and it'll update them for you. So those are sort of the three main causes, I would say, that can cause these reports to get stuck in a pending or waiting status. If it's none of those, again, reach out separately and just drop us a note in the chat. We can try to set up a one-off to look at something more specific, but there's so many things that can happen. I just find these are sort of, when I run into them, it's usually one of these three. Next question, and there's a lot of questions. You'll see there's a lot of overlap on these questions about configurations for DQM and tuning the DQM query service and routing traffic. So the question was, what's the best configuration for DQM? Should we tune one specific server for DQM query service and then route all the traffic there? What are the pros and cons? And like almost everything we're touching today, it depends on many different factors. 32-bit dispatchers can run CQM and DQM, so there's nothing preventing you from running DQM on a 32-bit server or having mixing and matching them. Basically, since Cognos 10, there's DQM has been available to run on the same server as CQM. Only when you change the report execution mode to 100% 64-bit, which is, where'd my server go? In the Cognos configuration, there's this setting here, report server execution mode, and you can make it 32 or 64-bit. You really don't get a whole lot, in my opinion, making this change. You're just going to basically completely eliminate the ability to run DQM. I'd say the only real reason to do this is if you want to just block the ability, say you're a relatively new Cognos customer, you don't have a lot of legacy 32-bit CQM packages and reports running, you can prevent them from being able to create or build anything by making the 64-bit, but you're not going to see a whole bunch of performance enhancements or any kind of major benefit by switching these to 64-bit. So I usually recommend to leave it that way. It's obviously much more difficult to migrate all your CQM to DQM, especially if you've been a long time Cognos customer. You've probably got a lot of stuff around there. And my usual recommendation is, you don't have to go and recreate everything, but all new development, I would recommend to use DQM. So, as far as tuning that, I mean, there's settings in the dispatcher around the query service. So if you go to your dispatchers, and I've only got a single one here, but you can go into the query service, and you've got specific tuning settings here. The main ones being these are the two that I typically focus on. There's an initial heap size and then the max heap size. So I find it helpful to bump this up normally if you're using DQM. Have it start at maybe like 4 gig instead of 1000 meg. And then if you're running a lot, you can exceed the default, which I think is 8000. You can make it 12, 16. If you've got a really beefy VM with 64, 128 gigs of RAM, you can make it even bigger, obviously. So these are going to be sort of the main two settings for tuning your DQM and your Java heap. And then as far as load balancing, specific servers, you can do that as well. I don't really see a whole lot of benefit of having one fully dedicated DQM and one not, unless again you're you're trying to move everything off CQM and you want, things to only run in 64-bit mode, but there's not really a huge pro and con on separating the DQM and the query service. I'll touch on some routing rules, another question in a couple slides, more about, load balancing between batch and interactive, but as far as the DQM, again, there's no reason to really separate them. 32-bit mode will handle DQM just fine. You're not going to see any major difference by switching to 64-bit execution mode. So our question is, our Cognos is sometimes so busy that the admin cannot sign into the portal and it takes a long time to do that. What can we do other than restart the server? This is another question that came in several different ways and a pretty common question. So typically this usually means that the server is overutilized, that it's not able to handle any additional requests because it's so busy. That includes, getting into the admin screens and being able to see what's going on, which is obviously a big problem. You can't tune or troubleshoot if you can't see what's going on. So typically the best way to do that is to adjust, your high and low affinity requests and the connections on the batch and report services. So if you've been to any of my other webinars in the past, I touch on, how these work, and I'll go into these a little bit today. I don't want to go too deep into this, but essentially, you have high and low affinity requests. The low affinity requests are going to be the reports that are running. So how many reports can I run? The high affinity requests are things that are, you want, split second response times, navigating to the portal, clicking folders, getting through those admin screens. Those are high affinity requests to kind of view the different things that are in there. So most likely there's not enough connections or not enough high affinity requests to be able to see the admin console or to be able to get a successful, page to load. So by lowering the number of connections or lowering the number of low affinity requests, you're going to be able to kind of free up and give the server a little bit of breathing room. Another thing to do is, if it's just certain times of the day or certain times of the month, year, I like to create audit reports that show usage over time. I usually like to create, a monthly, a weekly, and a daily that just show, spikes and dips in usage. And you can easily build these, with the audit package. If you're assuming you have that turned on and you're logging, usage, you could see, a certain time of the month, maybe the middle of the month or the first or the end, month close type deals. When things are getting really busy, and then you kind of know ahead of time, okay, this is when it's going to get busy, and kind of preemptively make some changes, scale things up, scale things down if you have that ability. You can also see, on like a more granular level, a specific day, it's quiet until 2 p.m. and then things, get crazy because there's 35 jobs that all run exactly at 2 p.m. So again, it's going to depend on every single organization, how things are set up, what the activities, what the business needs are. But by using audit reports and just monitoring the CPU, checking these high and low affinity requests and the connections on specifically the batch and report services, it should help you to, find why is it getting busy and put some governance in place to make sure that it's not locking you out of important admin screens. Other one, similarly related, our Cognos reports are running slower than usual. What is the best order for checking the system of reports? Again, it's most likely that just too many things are running at once. You need to kind of put some restrictions on the dispatcher and lower the number of requests that it can handle. So instead of having, 12 reports that running all at the same time and everything runs slowly because there's not enough utilization on the server, it'd be better to, cap it at 8. Yes, you have 4 people who have to wait for the report to run, but at least it's going through the queue. It's not locking up and just kind of bogging everything down. So one of the biggest things I see with, unstable environments and reports running slow is that they've sort of modified those high and low affinity and the connections to something much higher than that server can handle, leaving the default one that's in there is usually a pretty safe bet. It won't get you in too much trouble. Again, you may want to bump it up if you have, a lot more resources. I think the default that Cognos sort of specs for is maybe like 2 to 4 CPUs and like 16 or 32 gigs of RAM, which is sort of just like a basic installation. But if you've got a lot more than that, you've got 8 CPUs and 120 gigs of RAM, you can obviously bump that up, but you want to be careful how far you bump it up, because if you're taking on way too many reports, nothing's going to get run. So typically, check when this is happening, look at the server itself. What's your CPU, RAM utilization look like? It's possible it could not be Cognos, it could be the database. Maybe there's too many requests going to the database. If if you have the ability to, see that information or work with the DBA, see what it looks like on their end. How are these queries running? Is it handling it fine? Is the database overworked? And again, audit reports are really helpful here as well. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive on audit reporting in a little bit. But being able to see, is there a certain time that happens, frequently? You'll be able to kind of see that with some of these audit reports. Is it getting extra busy every day at a certain time or certain day of the month, things like that. And then these IPA, internet or interactive performance analyzer, and the logs itself can also be helpful. If there's errors in there, you can check the Cognos server logs. There's various logs in the installation directory that may point you in the right direction as well. So you can kind of go in there and see if there's anything, glaring that, there's a major issue or major error, which obviously would be sort of a one-off thing you have to deal with, but it's sort of a good last resort to just check those logs. So as far as, tuning these, I mentioned the high-low affinity and the connections on the batch report services. We do these, we call them health checks, where we kind of review environments that customers are having issues with and provide, recommendations. And we had one just a month ago, where one of the reasons why it was so busy was all the schedules were set to run at, a certain time of the day. Instead of staggering them out, later in the hour or later in the day, the server would just take on like 100+ reports, all at 9 a.m. every day, and things would just come to a complete halt. So by kind of moving them out, putting some controls on the dispatcher services, it was able to kind of free up a lot of those resources, be able to kind of process through that list and get through it, and then be able to handle all the live interactive requests coming in as well. And then finally, I love data sets. I talk about them too. If there's performance is an issue, data sets are kind of a get out of jail free card. These are great. You can kind of load these on a schedule, take the database and a lot of the query plans, explain plans out of the equation, any kind of network connectivity, just pre-cache the data into a very fast data set and build reports off of that. It should be extremely quick. And it's one of the best, things I think in Cognos 11 that they've added these data sets. Again, if you use other tools like Tableau or Power BI, it's similar to like a Tableau hyper extract or an import where you're going to suck all the data into Cognos itself, and it's just optimized for reporting extremely fast. So that's sort of a last resort, because it's going to be, more specific to probably one report, but you can definitely have them, address multiple reports if you kind of take a step back and look at, here's all these different reports that are accessing this specific data, which seems to be a bottleneck. Let's build a data set, maybe tie it together with some data modules, and you can kind of build something that's going to be very fast for reporting. What are best practices around tuning number of BI bus processes? Again, similar questions. These are all going to be controlled via the report and batch services. Again, the high and low affinities, number of connections. You've got things like peak and non-peak. The BI bus again is going to be the CQM engine. So you've got 2 to 4 gigs of RAM as sort of a cap, depending on whether it's 32-bit or 64-bit. Operating system, which I believe it's pretty rare I see 32-bit anymore, but I'm sure that they're out there. I know people are still running Cognos 10. I think someone I saw in one of the polls, one of the webinars, was running Cognos 8 somehow, which was mind-boggling. But again, these are all dispatcher settings that you can get to. Where's my properties? You go to tuning. I talk on this in lots of my other webinars, but there's 87 or so different things here, which is very overwhelming. But as I kind of say, there's a lot of repetition. You've got these 3: number of high affinity connections for batch, number of low affinity connections for batch, and number of processes for batch. This is during non-peak. These same 3 exist again somewhere else, during peak, and swap out the word batch for report, and you've got 3 for report during non-peak, 3 for report during peak. So it's very repetitive. So if you know what to look for and you kind of tune these a bit, you can either lower or increase depending on what your utilization looks like. So again, if you're looking at your busy time and you go to your server and you see, do I have it open? I've got pretty low CPU utilization right now, and I've got less than half of my RAM is being used. again, no one's really on the service. It's just sort of a test sandbox Senturus server. But if this was, peak day and I had all my users in here and I saw things like this, I mean, I'm very underutilized, so I can bump things up. I have enough RAM, enough CPU to allow the ability to increase, these settings here. If I come in and I see, this is at 100% and my RAM is almost, completely topped off, I probably want to scale it back down a bit. It's probably too high. There's too many things running at once. So by kind of tuning these different groupings, you can kind of get it so that, you can find a happy medium in there so that things are running as best they can without overloading the server. And you're also not kind of wasting and running an overpowered server that's not doing enough to justify the hardware that you've got on there. How can we identify the limit of the report count and schedule jobs on each server? I wasn't exactly sure what this question meant, but I'm assuming, you want to schedule jobs to run on different servers. So, I touched on the audit reports and then routing rules. So with the audit reports, do I have it in here? Here it is. With routing rules, if you haven't heard of these or haven't used these are really useful. You can, again, this assumes you have a multi-tiered environment, so you've got at least 2 dispatchers or more. But you can go ahead and say, I want to run, and you have 3 different options. You can base it on packages, on groups, or on roles. And you could say, if this package, I want it to run against this server, or this package goes against that server. Or you could split it up in various different ways and just direct traffic, route traffic to different servers. And one of the best ways I've seen to do this is if you've got your environment and you can't just schedule all the jobs off hours, non-peak hours. You can't just say I'm going to start scheduling all these reports at 6 p.m. and let them run until 6 a.m. Your job requires, or the organization requires, reports getting sent out all through the day. There's no downtime or ability to kind of take that away. So because of that, it's very, very busy. And the people who actually are going in there and trying to run reports are waiting a longer time. They're seeing that spinning blue wheel because a lot of the resources are chewed up by all these things running in the background and sending out emails and jobs. So to kind of offset that, you can dedicate a specific server to be, batch mode only and route the traffic to that so that if it takes a little bit longer for someone to get an email in their inbox, they're not going to notice as much as a person who's sitting there staring at that blue wheel and they're getting frustrated because it's taking a long time. So they, by splitting it up, they don't see any degradation of performance because it's completely optimized just for that user type. And you have all the jobs in the background running and going to a specific server. So routing rules are going to be a great way to do that. And, here's a sort of a screenshot of a customer we did a little while ago that has this in place. So you could see, I blurred the IPs, but the ones that are kind of highlighted in red here are dedicated batch servers. And you could see, the different report types here, 153,000 going to the batch view, 180,000 and very, minor report service going through 900, 2, whereas the ones that don't have the red, only a couple thousand going through, where you have 319,000, 325,000 going to report specific services. So this kind of does that, what I'm talking about. You've got dedicated batch, dedicated report, and this kind of makes everybody happy without, causing performance to go down. So you can see, with these IP addresses, what servers are doing what and how many processes and how many, requests or each ones are handling. So by doing so, you can kind of get a better view of what's going on with each server, what kind of requests is it handling, and then if it's an issue, you can set up routing rules to kind of push it one way or the other. The question that, again, I am probably not the best person to answer this. What are some of the advantages of the AI assistant? This is more for, a data scientist type role. It's kind of each version of Cognos is more and more, this is sort of the hot new thing, this artificial intelligence, this chat GPT type things. To be able to ask questions, get insights that maybe wouldn't be obvious to you. It's kind of the new Cognos 12. This is front and center, baked right into the front here. You can just ask questions and things like that. It can build dashboards. You can just ask it to, create a dashboard for you, which is kind of cool. Whether or not, it's going to be helpful, I don't know, but you can open up a package. It can provide some insights. You can say build a dashboard, I believe. I think hopefully this works. Dashboard. I know they've also added a lot of like natural language to this as well. So you can, once you've got a like a data set or model or something loaded, you can ask questions like show me, year over year analysis of the product X and revenue. And I think it can like build things like that for you. But right now it's going and just with a quick request, it's built me this 3-tab dashboard. Again, I don't know if this is anything really helpful here, but it's kind of cool that it did this for me, and I can just kind of go through and see, different things that it thinks may be relevant for, the quick scan that it did. So expect to see a lot more of this, as Cognos 12, gets more releases, but it's got value. Again, as far as, I'm more administration, report development, modeling, not so much into this data scientist type role, but if you are, I know it's got some value, but I'm not really the right person. I know we have a Cognos 12, what's new webinar coming up in a few weeks, and that might be a good one to ask a question if you're interested. From IBM, we'll be presenting that. They can probably give you a better demo or give you more information about the roadmap for where this is headed. But I know it's got a lot of hype, and this is sort of the new area. And as you can see here, they're putting this front and forward in Cognos 12, so it's the top thing here. And it's also baked in up here, so it's everywhere. Okay. I wanted to just show this performance assistant, product performance assistant, which it used to be called IPA, which is built into the reporting tool. There's a add-on in Cognos 12 now called the IPPA, which can give you some really cool information if you have slow performing reports as to kind of where the issue is. So one thing to note, and this drove me crazy when it first came out, they teased this as something that was new in Cognos 12. So there's a link how to set it up. It's not correct. This is actually the correct link. It's not done in the area they tell you it is. It's actually set up different areas. So they tell you in the first document, if you kind of search for it, that you need to put it into this configuration area, which there's some advanced settings that you can type in here to do different things. But typically you don't have to do this. They've had some things that had to be set here in the past, like to hide banners and stuff like that. So this is where they were saying to turn it on. It's actually not correct. It actually has to go into the dispatcher setting like this DISP zippy IPA enable true. So you have to put that in. As soon as you put that in, it's going to create about 10 new tables in your notification database if you have one. Otherwise, it goes to the content store. So again, another reason to separate the notification database. You're going to have even more tables living in there now if you turn this on. But once you've got it on, they give you a bunch of packages and built-in visualizations. Let's see here. And some built-in reports that are all going to be drill through related. So what's cool is that you can go and see, let me run one of my samples here. It was sales growth year over year. So this is just one of the standard Cognos reports. So the regular IPA has been here for, I want to say since 11.0, but you can just check this box under run options and say include performance details. And if you go ahead and run this now, it's HTML only to get this information. But if I run it, it's going to show me the amount of time it takes to render and query the data for each one of these objects. So I've got 3 different objects. I've got 2 visualizations and I guess like a list report here. And you can see I've got execution times. It took about 3.5 seconds, and out of those, it took to render the chart. It took less than half a second to query that data. It took 3 seconds. Down here, 0.2 seconds to render and 0.8 seconds to query, probably because it's using the same data. And then finally over here, I've got a list report. It took 33 milliseconds to render, and it took about 3.5 seconds to query this data. So if you've got a slow running report, that's a good start. You can kind of see, is there a specific object, a list, a crosstab, a visualization on the page that's the numbers just jump out at you. You have like 3.5 seconds here. Something is like 10,000 seconds. Okay, that's a good place to look. What makes this even better is you have this page, total page, here's what the whole page took. This used to just be a dead link. Now, because I've got the IPA enabled, this is a drill through, and I can just click on it. And it's going to give me a ton of information that's even more helpful. So I can see exactly now, what all the different services are. I've even got information about the process ID that can ties to the process ID on the server itself. So I can see this BI bus service took about 348 seconds, probably milliseconds. And I can go and see this process ID 13520. Here it is. So I can actually see the entire process. It tells me exactly what is running on the server itself. So these are all tied to specific processes on the server, and you can see, based on that, where the bottlenecks are. So it's actually the dataset Java service is taking, the longest, about 6 seconds. I can drill into this even further, and it's the query service. I can go into the query service. These kind of just keep going down and down. And I can see, it's the JDBC result set that took the longest amount of time. I've got things in here like the expression metadata. It'll show me all the different, fields that it's pulling and where they're, where they're coming from as far as the model. So I've got, some macros in here, and it kind of ranks these based on the time. So you can see all the different fields in there. It's also got back one page. I think it's the physical model. It'll show you the tables that it's going out and getting. So these are all tables, the actual, physical tables and the time it takes, to access these. So you can really go down pretty deep into this and see where everything's at. You can also look at like a Gantt chart that shows the entire report itself and in everything that it did. This might be kind of hard to read. It's a lot of information, but you can see, the amount of time it takes from beginning to end, all the different processes that happen. You can filter on them. You can say, I want to see just, the BI bus service. And then here you can kind of mouse over and see, at first it was running the specifications and getting that. Then it was hard to read, sending the request to the server, executing the thread. It gives you a very detailed view of everything that it's doing in order. So it kind of help you find, maybe there's something in here that's really slowing everything down. And you can even get, nice interaction with all these different prompts. They'll focus on specific things like execution, assembly, all the different things that it does, the query. So again, this I think is a really nice feature that's baked in. Again, all you have to do is just sort of add that dispatcher setting, go to import the package that has the model and the different visualizations and the reports, and then just when you're ready, just turn on that IPA and you can just drill into reports. So if you've got reports that have been driving you crazy and you can't seem to figure out why, it's very easy to set this up, in my opinion, and you can really get a good look at the explain plan in Cognos and all the different things that it's doing and try to pinpoint here's what I think the issue is. So pretty valuable, a nice feature that they added, especially if you're constantly tuning and looking to kind of troubleshoot some of these things. So jump back to the slides and then get to some additional questions. And so yeah, make sure you use this link. This deck will be posted, but this isn't going to help you. This is the one you want. Again, just kind of some screenshots of how to do it. You can drill into the detail. The different color coding. The blue is Java, the query engine, and then you've got green. It's going to be your BI bus, and then yellow is data set services. So you can kind of get a nice color coding as to what components are running, what's taking up the longest time, and how long things are running for. Okay, let me go grab some more questions from today. Let's see. I had one that came in that asked, have you ever run into a situation where non-root users suddenly lose access to various packages with a random intermittent occurring error? You don't have permission to the object. It occurs every few months despite no permission changes being made. I don't know if I've run into that before. The only thing I can think of is if you're doing deployments from, dev QA prod, something like that, it's possible that when you promote something up, it has different permissions. Other than that, I'd have to sort of see exactly what was happening. I don't know what that could be. And then another CQM, DQM. We run both CQM and DQM on a 32-bit server, which appears to be generating dump files. Are there any settings or advanced parameters to tweak on dispatchers running in CQM 32-bit execution mode that may reduce DQM triggered dump file generation? Again, it's kind of a specific one. I will say, the dump files that you get, they do usually have a timestamp. I find one of the best ways to sort of figure out why it's happening is to look at either the audit log, or if you have it in your prior activities. Do I still have Cognos open? You can go to past activities if it's not too far. Go to a specific date and see if you can find something that was running either at or during the time of the crash. Sometimes it's just a bad report. Something was just not built correctly. It's got custom SQL. It's got Cartesian joins. It's a lot of different things that could happen. If it's not a specific report, it just seems like it's more than that. There are some settings in Framework Manager. Let's see. So Framework Manager, I mean, people ask about the DQM conversion. If you haven't done it or you're not familiar, I mean, it's as simple as, where are my properties? If you have a package that's currently, in CQM, it's just, this is set to compatible mode. And all you have to do is just change it to dynamic mode and republish it. You also need to have a JDBC connection, but that's really all you have to do to convert to DQM. Republish your package and have that data source that it points to. Make sure that is set up for JDBC. That's all it is. The real challenge is just the testing. It's much more strict. There's certain things that may run fine in CQM that don't run as well or at all in DQM. There are as well some governors in here that you may need to tweak. If you ever looked at this screen, I think at the bottom here, yeah. So this whole last block of stuff here, you notice they have the DQM kind of in parentheses. These are all specific optimizations or governors for DQM. So you may want to look at some of these, kind of tweak these a little bit and see if any of these are sort of the issue. Again, I don't know exactly what you're seeing or what's causing it, but you can change these sort of governors possibly to get some better performance, or maybe to fix things that are not running. These are sort of the defaults, but these can be easily changed and republished. So maybe try to change one of these, republish it, see if this fixes anything for you. But there are some specific DQM governors in here that may or may not help fix your issue. Next question again, but gotcha is going from CQ to DQM. We have gone from version 10 to 11. There are performance concerns. We attribute this fact to the conversion. Are there anything we should look at a global level? So basically the same response, outside of knowing and being able to see the models. I would check the governors. I would just kind of look at create some basic reports out the model. Do they run fine? Is it the report itself? There's certain possibly bad design reports that could be causing an issue. It's hard to know exactly what the issue is, but I mean technically, a DQM package should run fine. There just must be something in there, some logic, or the way you modeled it, some bad joins or some bad calculations, something either in the model or report that's causing an issue. And And without, being able to kind of do like a deep dive into that, I can't really think of anything else offhand that would be, something that we could use to fix that. Another question was about affinity settings. I think I kind of covered that. There's the low and high affinities. And low is going to be the ones for reports. They're slower. You expect them to kind of be a slower response time, whereas high affinity are things like, me clicking through here, navigating these. So again, back to that first question about, this locks up. Most likely you don't have any high affinity requests available to let these run. You should be able to kind of quickly or somewhat quickly navigate through. I mean, sometimes these take a little while. If you have a lot of stuff in the queue, it has to go and query the content store database and show you, what's in there. And it's also possible your content store database is just overwhelmed. You don't have enough resources to kind of handle all the connections and queries to that. So if the screens, that are not, static like this one or this one are taking a long time to load, the statuses or the schedules, it's possible that the issue is the content store itself. Do you have a lot of bloat? Do you have enough connections? Is the database itself, properly sized to handle, the amount of usage you have? And as far as bloat, I meant to talk about this as well. I forgot. There's some scripts in here you can run to clean things up. So the consistency check, if you haven't heard of this will go and scan any profiles that get created by users. If they no longer exist in your LDAP or your Active Directory, it's going to find a mismatch, and you can have it either find them or find it and fix them. And it's good to fix that. And that's going to remove any kind of old references, clean up their my folder. So if they have a bunch of junk, in there, that'll clean that up. These content removals and retention rules are also useful. So most likely, people don't set the number of versions, the number of outputs you can create. So I've seen, Cognos shops that have had, a user for 5-10 years who didn't even know they were doing it. They were running, a 100-page PDF and saving it unlimited versions every day just in the content store database. And so there was this, huge amount of output that was just stored and just bogging down the content store database because there was just something running and saving over and over and over again, these snapshots of the same report and never being cleaned up. So you can go and run these scripts and say, remove anything from 6 months ago or remove anything that's got more than 5 versions. They're pretty straightforward. You can kind of go to these different wizards and just kind of create these scripts and run them on a schedule to kind of keep things from getting too outdated or people stacking up, too many saved output versions. Those can help a lot. There's also a script that can kind of give you, if you're not sure if you're a candidate for something like that, there's a script in that scripts folder. I think it's under content. Yeah, you can get this profiling script, and this will basically give you a complete dump of like all the different object types you have. How many reports, how many query reports, how many data source connections. It'll also show you the amount of file outputs that are saved in your content store database. So if you do see this being really large, or your DBAs complain, hey, your content store database is 300 gigabytes, it shouldn't be that big. You can run some scripts to clean it up. So this will kind of tell you what's out there. And if it is really large, you can run some of those scripts straight out of here to kind of clean things up. That will actually really help a lot, I think, if you've got a lot of junk in there. Another question about the admin console seems to only load in the morning or evening. When I try to regular business hours, I get a proxy error message. Again, most likely it's just you're trying to access it during a busy time and it's doesn't have enough connections to make that happen. So I would just say try to tune those dispatcher settings, possibly lower or increase the number of high affinity connections and lower the low and see if that helps. Let's see, another question here about physical machines versus virtual machines for big data. I don't know anything specific about big data. Physical machines and virtual machines, I feel like the physical machines are becoming more and more rare to see. Everything's, either in, like an AWS or Microsoft cloud or, like a company cloud these days, and they're all VMs. I do know, there is a little bit of performance loss, with those, but nothing substantial. They've come a long way in, the last 10, 15 years. I think we used to allocate, add another like 20% for a VM, so 1.2 virtual cores would equal, one physical core, something like that. I don't know if that's still the case. I haven't seen any sort of white papers or documentation around that. But as far as big data, I don't know anything specific about that. I wouldn't think there would be any sort of issue, physical versus virtual. But again, I don't know that much about that topic, so I'd have to look into that a little bit more. If you have more information about that, what type of big data or what exactly you're doing, I could try to take a look at that. Okay, let's go to the Q&A panel now. Let's see, I've got a question about dynamic cubes. Dynamic cube is slow to reload after new data has been loaded into the tables. If new is loaded, it takes 4 to 6 minutes. After the data is loaded, it can take over 30 minutes to reload the cube and the aggregates. How can I speed this up and make it consistent? I honestly haven't used dynamic cubes in several years. I don't know exactly why that would happen. I know that tool, it hasn't been deprecated, but they haven't really invested or made any changes or updates to that tool in a while. So we kind of stopped using it a bit because it was difficult to administer. I'm happy to take a look offline, but I don't know offhand, what exactly is going on. Those dynamic cubes are challenging sometimes to tune and to deal with some of the reload and the aggregations on there. They're a bit confusing. So if you'd like, just reach out and we could try to set up like a one-off look at that. Another question on the audit extensions. These are, I think if you attended one of my other webinars, I talked about this. These used to be, something you had to download from the IBM website, and there's a whole configuration process. So now they've made it a little bit easier. I believe it's now, where is it? Just in straight up installation directory, samples, audit extension. So you don't have to download it, it's already here. There's this war file that you just have to create with some scripts. I believe it's already built now, and you can just drop it into your WL drop-ins folder here. I think you have to restart. I think there's documentation here as well. If I go to docs. Yeah, the whole setup's here. I might do a maybe I'll do like a blog post or video post on how to set this up, but it's gotten much easier. This is probably a little bit outdated, but this is what they provide. It was sort of an unsupported thing that they used to give you, but this is great because this sort of fills the gap of the regular audit reports and the things that haven't been run. So audit reports are going to be on demand. So if I have 100 reports and only my users have only run 20 of them, and I run the reports to show me, what's the usage I see, I'm only going to see 20 reports. I'm not going to know about the other half that doesn't live, it doesn't exist because it hasn't ever been run. This is going to kind of give me a full dump of, all the objects, all the reports, all the users. Even if users haven't been logged into the system, the accounts are still there in Active Directory. So you can kind of get a lot more information out of this that's not currently possible with the standard audit report. So this is sort of the audit extension. So yeah, I'll try to do a separate webinar or a blog post on setting this up and just kind of reviewing how it all works. It's a bit more involved than just the standard audits where you just kind of create a database and turn the logging on. There's some tuning and there's some things you have to kind of run and schedule, but it's not terrible. And you've got these different deployments that you can just import that have some predefined reports. But the main one is to kind of get this war file published and then to kind of go and make a couple settings changes into the tool itself. Let's see. If the user ended up running the report with a criteria pulling out the records, how and where in Cognos can you see what the user selected in the prompts? So that one, typically you have to kind of see it on the database. I know that you can put into the data source connections. Let's say like it was off this great outdoor sales. I think this is where you put it. Haven't done this in a while. think you can put some kind of values into these open and close session commands that will highlight the parameters. I'll have to double check. It's been a long time since I've done this. Outside of being able just to see the query running on the database where it's usually got built-in where clauses, where fiscal year equals 2022 and product line equals camping equipment, something like that. It's difficult to kind of see that information in Cognos, but I know there are ways to do it. I believe it's using these session commands, but it's been a while. So let me research that a little bit and see. Let's see, someone asking about uploading spreadsheets to append, not replace my data on Cognos. When I add a new field to Excel, it does not let me append the data. What is the solution? I have a lot of historical data already on Cognos. And I haven't done a whole lot of Excel spreadsheet reporting. I might have to take that one offline as well and see what the deal is with that. So you're adding a new field, it's not picking it up. Yeah, I'll have to check and see. If you know what version you're on, can you put that in the chat as well, just so I know? It might be something they've addressed in a newer version. If you're not, current, maybe it's something that was at level 2 or in Cognos 12. I'll have to check and see on that. Do like one more here, then I'll wrap up with some of the closing slides. Just join the webinar. I want to know what version of analytics we are having issues of scheduled reporting. Don't know if I understand the question. Let's see. Yeah, you might need to just give me a little more information on that one. I mean, all Cognos has been able to support scheduled reporting since way back ReportNet, Cognos 8, things like that. So it's not anything new, but I think I just understand the phrasing of the question. So please, you could reword that. Another question on IPA, how is it different from audit extension? You kind of talked on that, audit extension is going to give you much more information on just the overall environment itself. Audit extension is going to give you like specifics like we saw with the IPA, runtimes, explain plans, what different processes are running, on the back end on the server to kind of get that report out to the user. The audit extension is going to give you much more information about, the objects, the capabilities, the users, things like that aren't easy to get currently out of the tool. I'll do one more here. Here's a good one. Is it necessary to restart Cognos on a regular basis, especially if we stop the Oracle database nightly to perform a backup? We're currently not stopping Cognos because it recovers from loss of connection to Oracle, but the DB notices weirdness with logins and occasionally that restarting the service corrects. So you shouldn't have to restart Cognos. A lot of people do, I know. If your Cognos environment is running smoothly, you don't have errors and everything is, working correctly, you shouldn't really have to. I do know occasionally some report, BI processes or, Java processes can get hung sometimes. Someone will kick off a long job and they'll cancel it halfway through, and sometimes things can get stuck in there. Those types of things, if that's happening a lot, then it might make sense to schedule maybe like a weekly restart. But this one that I run in the sandbox here, obviously it's not getting nearly as much usage as your environment probably is, but it'll stay up for months at a time with no issues. So unless there's something, like you said, weirdness going on with the database, you shouldn't really have to do it, but it can't hurt. I know people are very religious about scheduling a weekly restart on their servers, but you shouldn't have to do that. And if you are seeing things like that, just reach out offline and we can take a look and see if there's something specific that's kind of causing some connections to hang or some issues with Oracle. But I don't know anything offhand that should have been doing that, unless it's possibly a version like a driver issue or maybe just an incompatibility between the versions. I'd have to kind of see. Okay, so I know there's a couple more questions. We only have about 3 more minutes here. So let me just kind of go through the wrap-up slides and then we'll end it, and I will follow up with a posted response to the ones I didn't get to today. Okay, so just a quick plug here. We offer different upgrade support levels, plus additional servers to ensure the success of your upgrade. We do hundreds of upgrades, installations, and configurations every year. So if you need any help, definitely reach out. We've also got blogs and on-demand webinars, and plus lots of other Cognos tips. So if this was helpful today and you want more, there's plenty of free information out there. Just go to Senturus.com and that URL on the screen, Business Intelligence Cognos, and there's dozens and dozens of webinars going back 10, 15 years on all kinds of different topics that may be helpful. A couple additional resources. We've got free resources on the website in our Knowledge Center that aren't comparisons. We've been committed to sharing our BI expertise for over a decade. Just go to Senturus.com resources. We've got some upcoming events. The external tools for Power BI Desktop, that's Thursday, August 10th. Chat with Pat, working with time and dates in Power BI, that's August 17th. Power BI Report Builder and Paginated Reports, August 24th. And then another Chat with Pat, Framework Manager Modeling, Wednesday, September 20th. So I know I kind of touched on some of the FM stuff today. If you are doing DQM conversions, Pat's going to do sort of a deeper dive into FM modeling. So that might be, a good time to, ask some questions or play with those governors I mentioned and have some follow-up questions for Pat. He can probably help you with those. And then just a little bit background on Senturus. We concentrate on BI modernizations and migrations across the entire BI stack, provide a full spectrum of BI services, training in Power BI, Cognos, Tableau, Python, Azure, proprietary software to accelerate bimodal BI and migrations. We've been focused exclusively on business analytics for over 20 years, and our team is large enough to meet all of your business analytic needs, yet small enough to provide personal attention. And we're hiring. If you're interested in joining us, we're looking for the following positions. You can look at the job descriptions on our website and email us your resume at jobs@senturus.com. And then finally, I've got a bunch of questions in the Q&A, but if you have anything you wanted to get off your chest or just put in there now, like I said, I will grab them. I'll leave it up for about 5 more minutes, but go ahead and put them in there and I will grab that list. And as I said, publish something out, hopefully, if not end of the week, early next week. Thanks for everyone for attending, and I will see you on the next one.